something evolving. Whatever may come, the world keeps revolving. They say the next big thing is here, that the revolution's near. But to me it seems quite clear that it's all just a little bit of history repeating.
I am reading a Facebook post from Exhort and Contend. According to this post, this is September 16th, prayer vigil in America, this Friday in Los Angeles at historic Angelus Temple at 7 p.m. We need a praying church to rise up. We need God to move in our nation. We need revival. And the screenshot below, Sean Foyt is hosting a prayer vigil for America tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time in Los Angeles. Here's a novel idea, Sean. Why don't you host a prayer vigil for the lost? God obviously isn't concerned about saving a particular political system, since he has children around the world who live under various types of governmental systems. What he does care about is souls, Sean, because your spiritual state takes priority over our physical one every single time. Besides leading people astray by having them focus on America rather than souls, Foyt is doing the same by encouraging them to bring flags. He apparently doesn't care to study the Masonic history of the flag, as discussed previously in this post, which includes a video of him telling viewers that his sighting of a bald eagle and a flag was a sign from heaven. America is a false light, a mixture of the sacred and the profane, as this post explains. That we might stay true to Jesus and the Great Commission, dear brethren. I found the fact that it was at Angelus Temple
very interesting.
And I thought, why not look into that a little bit, or learn a little 20th century church history while we're at it. Okay?
From the faith of your fathers, you're drifting away from prayer, drifting away from the Bible reading, drifting away from the family altar, and only ruin and the heartbreak and the home break lay in the direction of backsliding. I am coming out to help bring you back, if I can, to the fold. Give me a burden for souls, Lord. Give me a love for the lost. Let my heart bleed as I own, Lord. Give me a burden for souls.
On New Year's Day, 1923, Angelus Temple, the largest church in the city, opened its doors to the public for the first time. McPherson had managed to raise $300,000 for the grand building, leading one critic to say that Sister Aimee had put the cost in Pentecost.
Along about 3 o'clock on Sunday, there would be a line of people down Glendale Boulevard for 2 blocks. And at 5 o'clock, the doors would open, and 5,000 people would course into this building and fill every seat.
McPherson had built one of the first mega-churches in the United States, and she designed it to look more like a place for Hollywood movies than a place of worship.
And in comes Mrs. McPherson with a huge bouquet of roses. And at the moment the crowd sees her, 5,000 people start applauding wildly.
Friends, let's give our lives to Jesus Christ. Let's really become healed in Jesus.
Once on the Angelus Temple stage, Sister Aimee used her unique blend of humor, charisma, and storytelling to deliver the age-old evangelical message about salvation through Jesus Christ. Each service built to the same climax, the altar call, or the invitation to come forward and be born again.
Everyone stand. It says, I need Jesus in my life.
Quite often, people that come down, their lives are changed from that very night. and they become a Christian.
Come on, young man. Come on down from that balcony.
She published monthly magazines. And just at the moment when radio was born, she built her own Christian radio station. KFSG broadcast Angelus Temple sermons, healing services instructing listeners to place their hands on their radio sets, and serial dramas such as The Adventures of Jim Trask, Lone Evangelist. Some nights the signal reached as far as Australia.
When she first envisioned the station, she said that there were some 200,000 radio receiving sets in the Los Angeles area. But within just a few years, radio was ubiquitous in nearly every home, and she had the foresight to ride the crest of that wave.
My friends, if you're starving, tonight there's salvation. There's a baptism of the Holy Ghost.
Shortly before she died, Sister Aimee applied for a license for an experimental television station, and so had she lived, she surely would have been one of the first televangelists.
I'm on William Branham Historical Research, and this is an article about Aimee Semple McPherson. Aimee Semple McPherson was the central figure for the Foursquare Church sect of Pentecostalism and the founder of the massive Angelus Temple in Los Angeles. It became America's first true megachurch, attracting 40 million visitors in its first 7 years of operation. Many men responsible for the spreading of William Branham's ministry were either trained by, affiliated with, or working for the Angelus Temple. Leroy Kopp, who promoted William Branham's ministry through the video 20th Century Prophet, was the vice chairman of the Angelus Temple Evangelists. Herrick Holt, president of the Sharon Orphanage, from which the Latter Rain movement promoted and spread William Branham's ministry, was a minister trained by the Foursquare Church. Wesley Swift. Now I'm going to read a little bit about Wesley A. Swift. Wesley A. Swift was one of the original leaders of the racist and anti-Semitic Christian identity doctrine, which William Branham would later rebrand as serpent seed. Swift either influenced or worked directly with several men associated with William Branham's ministry, including the Reverend Leroy Kopp, who would become an icon in Branham's message sect for his interview with William Branham in the video 20th Century Prophet. Swift was present at the Little Rock 9 incident in civil rights, which was heavily influenced by Roy E. Davis, original Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. Over time, Swift became an authority on the subject of race, and his national lectures and radio broadcasts quickly spread Christian identity theology. It says, when Roy E. Davis, who was the Imperial Wizard, and William D. Upshaw set up their base of operations in San Bernardino, collecting money for the Usher Davis Children's Orphanage that fronted their work towards sparking the third wave of the Ku Klux Klan, Swift was working with Detroit pastor Gerald L.K. Smith to revive the KKK in California. Swift was Smith's bodyguard. When the California Klan became public in April of 1946, Swift took the lead in a cross-burning rally held in the Big Bear Valley. He said, "The Klan is here in Big Bear to stay. We intend to form restrictive covenants here and elsewhere in order to hold the line of pure Americanism." It should be noted, shortly prior to the California revival of the Klan, Upshaw held conventions on subjects such as Americanism that will save America, that will save America. And Upshaw was the head of the Department of Americanism in Davis's orphanage that fronted his funding for the Klan. According to witnesses that testified against Upshaw and Davis, Upshaw helped Davis pose as a federal agent to create assumptions of federal authority. Also during this time, Foursquare minister Herrick Holt began raising funds to erect an orphanage in North Battleford, Saskatchewan. Holt was also a leader in the Foursquare Gospel sect, led by Aimee Semple McPherson, and began plans to open his Sharon Orphanage in May 1944. In the late 1940s, this orphanage, its leaders, and its students became the flame that ignited William Branham's ministry and his latter reign doctrine. Once it was established, Roy E. Davis, again, the Grand Wizard, Roy E. Davis relocated to Fort Worth, Texas, where he would promote Branham's ministry through the Voice of Healing and lead the southern branches of the Ku Klux Klan as the Imperial Wizard of the original Knights of the Ku Klux Klan and the president of the Oak Cliff White Citizens Council. I'll stop there. Here's a nice quote. He said, "If you believe the Bible, you are going to be a segregationist. If you believe the Bible, you are not going to work out any deal of coexistence in the devil's kingdom because your race was sent down here to overthrow it." And Branham said, "Here not long ago I preached on the subject there in my own hometown. They had them all out, and I preached on the overthrow of the United States government. We give them integration. Now it's worse than it ever was." Wesley Swift, the originator of Branham's serpent seed doctrine, was trained in the Angelus Temple school and was a Foursquare minister. Gerald Burton Winrod was a Wichita, Kansas native nicknamed the Jayhawk Nazi and the Kansas Hitler. Winrod founded the Defenders of the Christian Faith, a fundamentalist Christian fascist organization. Winrod was a primary source of Wesley A. Swift's Christian identity doctrine, which William Branham would later rebrand as the serpent seed doctrine, and appears to be the source of William Branham's position that President Roosevelt was a dictator that caused World War II. In the late 1940s and 50s, Winrod's theology would become a theme in the latter rain and Voice of Healing revivals that would unite to form the post-World War II Healing Revival. Winrod was already a popular name among the Pentecostals, so much so that Aimee McPherson appointed Winrod as her replacement when she became too ill to continue preaching. Winrod's leadership of the Angelus Temple led to anti-Nazi protests and bomb threats. Interestingly, it was shortly after Winrod's engagement that William Branham's campaign manager, Gordon Lindsay, was appointed to field position work for the Angelus Temple. Gordon Lindsay toured Canada holding British Israel conferences, helping to spread Winrod's agenda in the years leading up to the Healing Revival. William Branham, leader of the Healing Revival, convinced the masses that communism was invading the church in opposition to his brand of divine healing, and that, as a result, Christian churches, not in his cult following, had become apostates. Winrod frequently attacked the Federation of Churches, claiming that the group had rejected the virgin birth of Christ, both which were also themes used in William Branham's revivals. Winrod preached throughout the country in the late 1920s in everything from conventions for the Christian and Missionary Alliance churches, describing Mussolini's connection to the return of Christ and the end of days. Gerald Burton Winrod, Swift's inspiration and the originator of Branham's 1933 Benito Mussolini prophecy, toured with McPherson.
Of the white supremacy doctrines introduced into American Christianity in the 20th century, the Christian identity doctrine is one of the most destructive. It has been used by hate groups as a basis for discrimination, white supremacists as a justification for murder, and extreme right political activists to push racist agendas for decades. From the Ku Klux Klan to the Aryan nations, many violent hate groups adopted the Christian identity doctrine and weaponized religion against people with black skin. Christian identity doctrine is the belief that the biblical Eve mated with the serpent from the Garden of Eden to produce a cursed and evil bloodline. Wesley Swift popularized the doctrine, teaching white supremacists that the bloodline continued through time to produce Mystery Babylon from the Book of Revelation, and the end of days race war was imminent. According to Swift, that evil bloodline came through Noah's son Ham, which was believed to be the father of the nations of Africa. William Branham further helped spread the doctrine in the 1950s and in the 1960s. As the leader of the post-World War II healing revival, Branham rebranded Swift's Christian identity doctrine as serpent seed and removed the word black and Jew from the doctrine. Instead, he hinted at people with black skin by claiming, just like Swift, the evil bloodline came through Ham, the son of Noah. Once serpent seed was established in the latter-rain revivals, William Branham introduced the racial component into latter-rain theology. Branham called the racial component hybriding and suggested that interracial marriage between blacks and whites would produce a, quote, hybrid, and that hybrid could not enter the kingdom of heaven for several generations. You can learn this and more on william-branham.org.
You know what? Sometimes this is hard, and I feel like a party pooper or Debbie Downer, but I really think it needs to be known. Okay, so this is a video I found. This is from Angelus Temple Sunday worship service, and this is from 14 years ago. I just thought I would talk over it. And I just want to say that I know the people that are participating here and the people that were probably participating in the prayer vigil for America really do not maybe know that the floor they're standing on, there's a basement underneath of it of some really ugly things. And when you compare what was being taught in the times that they were living in back in those days to the current situation with religion and politics and everything, I just have to wonder, is history repeating? I'm just looking at the big picture, and the lady who actually started this church was known for her showbiz antics, and it was the first mega church. It was connected to the latter rain and William Branham. And Sean Foyt, who comes from Bethel, which is also connected to all of that. I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying that everyone involved has an understanding of all this stuff. And to be really honest, if I would have walked into this church 14 years ago, I probably would have thought it was super awesome. So, anyhow, I'm going to add the tail end of this video. One thing leads to another. And the reason is because I included the introduction to the book Weaponized Religion by John Collins, and somebody commented on that video today. I re-listened to it and I was like, that's a great ending because it mentions Aimee McPherson and Winrod and Wesley Smith and all those different characters, and I think it's good to know. It gives you a bigger scope, especially of the situation with mixing this like political rally, religious kind of thing together.
The City of Angels, and I want to invite Pastor Matthew Barnett. Can we welcome him to come up here?
Oh, it's so good to be with you guys tonight, and I think you know this or you might not know. You're in one of the most historic places. You talk about the roots of revival. This whole building was built by a woman in the 1920s, Aimee McPherson, who came to the city of LA from Canada in her old gospel car, started preaching in Echo Park, and one of the greatest revivals ever seen. This building was built during the Great Depression, and one of the greatest examples of what could happen when someone is available. All this happened. You see the stained glass windows, they'll light up here in a second, but they were donated by the Gypsies, a group of people that were oftentimes cast aside, but she loved them and they donated these. Oh, I mean, you are in a place that is so ripe for something great to happen tonight. And I just want you to catch the spirit of what God is doing. There's great soil and seeds sown in this place. In the 100th year, we're in the 100th year of this place. And so I just think tonight we ought to just give God praise because you are standing on a very holy ground because of those who have gone before you, who have paved the way for revival. Come on, let's have a good night tonight, and let's see great things come out of California.
C.S. Lewis once said that almost all crimes of Christian history have come about when religion is confused with politics. Politics, which always runs by the rules of ungrace, allures us to trade away grace for power, a temptation the church has often been unable to resist. And that's Philip Yancey, Christians and Politics, Uneasy Partners. Introduction. I'm just going to read the introduction, and this book is on Amazon and it's on Kindle, it's on Audible, so you should read it, but this introduction kind of covers some of the main ideas that are in the rest of the book. The latter rain movement of the late 1940s and 50s created a new breed of Pentecostalism that dramatically impacted Christianity in the United States, as well as many other countries around the world. Initially viewed as a movement by God, a number of well-respected men and women participated in the movement during its early years. Over time, however, many of those same men and women came to realize that there were wolves among the sheep. Political ideologies not aligned with sound biblical theology crept into the movement, causing the group to explode into several splinter groups. New sects were created, and while some of them reformed, others became very destructive and militant. Such is the case with Paul Schaefer Schneider, leader of the Colonia Dignidad compound in Chile. In March 2005, Paul Schaefer was found hiding in the expensive gated community of Las Acacias, about 25 miles from Buenos Aires, Argentina. He had been on the run for nearly 8 years and was extradited to Chile to face an array of charges, from the rape and torture of children to his involvement with the 1976 disappearance of political activist Juan Mano. 2 months later, after his Pentecostal community was raided by government officials, it was discovered that the men and women dressed in the style of Pentecostal holiness fashion had been manufacturing, selling, and using weapons, including sarin gas, all from what appeared to be a humble religious community. Schaefer was the leader of a splinter group of The Message, the cult following of William Marion Branham, aka William Marvin Branham, from Jeffersonville, Indiana. In the early 1950s, German Baron Frere von Blomberg became one of William Branham's campaign managers and organized a tour through Germany. Von Blomberg was a strong supporter of Branham's anti-communist revivals due to the horrific things that Russian soldiers did to his family. Branham went to Germany, and Baron von Blomberg helped William Branham establish a series of 15 offices in Sweden, Finland, Germany, Africa, Norway, Belgium, France, and 2 in Canada. Paul Schaefer, the infamous leader of Colonia Dignidad, was assigned to be William Branham's security detail. Schaefer was recruited into the Message cult and became programmed to believe Branham's end-of-days prophecies, as well as his misogynistic and abusive doctrines. These were the same years that Reverend Jim Jones, who created a similar compound in South America, was rising to become a leader in Branham's Message sect. Okay, pause. I'm pausing myself. So let's get this straight. Colonia Dignidad, a Nazi torture compound in South America in Chile, and Jonestown in Guyana by Jim Jones were both related to William Branham. But will the NAR tell you that? This is critically important for understanding Schaefer's authoritative control over his sect, as this was during the early years of Branham's manifested Sons of God theology. Pause. Which also is espoused by people like Lance Wallnau and Mike Bickle and all these other guys. Unpause. Branham had recruited Jones into a militant version of Pentecostal extremism referred to as Joel's Army, a group of extremists on domestic terrorism watch lists such as the Southern Poverty Law Center prior to 1963. This theology empowered numerous ministers with authoritarian control by manipulating congregants to believe that the deity was speaking directly to them as the spoken word or the voice of God through superhuman central figures. Sound familiar? Bob Jones and Schaeffer used this to their both Jim Jones and Schaeffer used this to their advantage, and because of this, many of their congregants were either murdered or sacrificed their lives. As the investigation into Schaeffer's cult compound continued, the level of domestic and international crimes discovered was mind-boggling. The cult compound had harbored Nazi leaders fleeing to South America, and Colonia Dignidad became known as the colony to fleeing Nazis. The CIA and Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal claimed to have evidence that Hitler's angel of death, Joseph Mengele, spent time in Colonia Dignidad. Message believers in Colonia Dignidad began torturing and killing everyone from opponents of the current political regime to children who disobeyed Branham's cult rules. They were also manufacturing and stockpiling weapons of war. During their searches of the compound, officials found surface-to-air missiles, rocket launchers, machine guns, submachine guns, hand and cluster grenades, rifles, anti-personnel mines, automatic pistols, and a large amount of ammunition. Officials found traces of sarin gas and learned that the message believers were manufacturing chemical and biological weapons. Also found were 500 files on people who had been assassinated in Chile, from political leaders to entertainers. One file had the name John F. Kennedy on it, and inside were 2 bullets of the same caliber rifle used by Lee Harvey Oswald during the assassination of JFK. Boy. As historical analysts began to examine the many unusual details of the compound and began interviewing cult members, it became apparent that those participating had undergone a deep level of mind control and were being manipulated through Schaeffer's religious practices. Schaeffer had used a weaponized version of religion, and it had the power to overthrow the Chilean government and to install the ruthless dictator Augusto Pinochet into power. Like Hitler controlled Nazi Germany, and with the help of many high-ranking Nazi officials, Schaeffer was able to convince cult members to brutally torture political opponents. At the same time, Schaeffer was molesting Chilean boys, and the cult physician prescribed sedatives to assist in the sexual abuse when they resisted. Colonia Dignidad was therefore also one of the most ruthless places of detention for political prisoners in Chile. New bunkers, long underground tunnels, and laboratories very similar to those of Auschwitz were born inside. According to the most recent documents, the well-known Nazi doctor Joseph Mengele also found hospitality in the structure. Psychedelic drugs were tested on inmates, and electroshock was common. In addition, the effect of sarin gas was also examined in the secret basement of the concentration camp. Those who died joined the long list of disappeared and ended up in mass graves. Yet what Schaeffer was able to achieve in Chile was not unique or unusual. The message cult and its doctrine had enabled leaders of other splinter groups around the world to do the same. Branham cult leader Robert Martin Gumbura, for example, established a Pentecostal military compound in Zimbabwe that nearly overthrew the Zimbabwe government. Like Schaeffer, Gumbura was involved in sexual crimes, some of which were based on William Branham's serpent seed and polygamous theology. The end-time message dictates various disturbing beliefs, which include claims that women are inferior to men, all because the first female, Eve, in the book of Genesis had intercourse with a live snake, producing a half-serpent, half-human child, Esau. That makes no sense. They also hold that their church founder, William Marion Branham, is the last prophet of the New Testament. This revelation comes shortly after end-time message pastor Robert Gambura, who had 13 wives, was slapped with a half-a-century jail term for having raped several women last year. Gambura was running his own sidekick, but utilizing the same religious poison that demeans women and claims that women are responsible for the mankind's fall, and so a man can marry as many women as he wishes. There are hundreds, possibly thousands of groups that splintered from William Branham's post-World War II healing revivals. Pause. All those healing revivals that they teach you about that were so great with Oral Roberts and a whole bunch of other people. Paul Kane, who's connected to Mike Bickle and IHOP. That's why we're reading this. I'm sorry. Those whose lineage branched directly from any of the original versions of William Branham's cult of personality seem to wander further into extremism than the more distant splinter groups, but with the vastly different versions of doctrine used by different versions of William Branham's stage persona, the spider web of siblings and cousins to the group seem countless. Collectively, they are called the New Apostolic Reformation, nicknamed the Christian Taliban. Looking the opposite direction in history, however, prior to William Branham's leadership in the post-World War II healing revival, the doctrinal genealogy looks much the same. There was nothing that William Branham introduced that was new. Every version of doctrine that was introduced as new by Branham came from other sources that were influential among Branham's peers. Even the serpent seed doctrine, which would cause over 300 ministers to denounce William Branham after an event hosted by Jim Jones in Chicago. A doctrine many believe to have been Branham's own creation, was a rebranding of the Christian identity doctrine of one-time Angelus Temple minister Reverend Wesley A. Swift under the manipulation of cult leader Aimee McPherson. Pause. Also touted as some God's general or something with these gnarly types. All their generals and heroes are psychos. I'm just saying. Somebody name me one that's not a psycho. I'm sorry. According to Swift, the serpent in the Garden of Eden mated with Eve to produce Cain, and from Cain there came all races with black skin. Swift's theology was weaponized by white supremacists during the 1950s and 60s in the battle against civil rights. Branches from the Christian identity tree include the neo-Nazi Aryan nations and other hate groups. Though Branham convinced his cult of personality that the doctrine was original and given to him by divine revelation, many of his mentors, peers, and contemporaries have the same revelation. Once integrated into their theology, it became a weaponized form of religion targeting people with black skin. Yet Wesley Swift did not create the notion that the biblical mother of all living had sexual affair with an animal. Before the Christian identity doctrine took its form and became popularized and weaponized in the United States, British Israelism was used to target Jewish people. According to British Israelism, the offspring of Eve and the serpent were the Jews that we see today, and the people of Great Britain are genetically, racially, and linguistically the direct descendants of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. This was the theology weaponized by Adolf Hitler. Oops, I said the name. By Adolf Hitler during the Holocaust. In his book Mein Kampf, Hitler stated, "The nationalization of our masses will succeed only when, aside from all the positive struggle for the soul of our people, their international poisoners are exterminated. If at the beginning of the war and during the war 12 or 15,000 of these Hebrew corruptors of the nation had been subjected to poison gas, such as had been endured in the fields by hundreds of thousands of our very best German workers of all classes and professions, then the sacrifice of millions at the front would not have been in vain. Wow. Looking back through time at the horrific extinction of Jewish people at the hands of the Germans in Nazi concentration camps, and now understanding Adolf Hitler's deep burning hatred for Jewish people, one would assume that only a very small minority of people in the United States would have agreed with Adolf Hitler before, during, and after World War II. The sad truth is that with the exception of murder and genocide, many Pentecostals and fundamentalists in the United States were in full agreement. So much so that Gerald Burton Winrod, the Jayhawk Nazi, and Kansas Hitler built an entire religious organization on that very premise. Winrod was so popular among fundamentalists that F. Bosworth, William Branham's spiritual mentor in the post-World War II healing revival, invited Winrod to submit articles for his Exploits of the Faith magazine. Paul Rader, the second president of the Christian and Missionary Alliance, held conferences with Winrod, some of which opened at the Cadle Tabernacle, Indiana, Klan headquarters. Rader was a member of Winrod's Defenders of the Christian Faith movement. Gordon Lindsay, Branham's first campaign manager, was a member of the Anglo-Saxon Christian World Movement, a British Israelism organization. During World War II, this movement was weaponized politically against Franklin D. Roosevelt. Religious leaders began openly declaring the Jewish race to be the cause of communism, and that Jews were working with Russia to invade the religious and political systems of the United States. The weaponized doctrine quickly spread through fundamentalist Christianity, leading to a severe impact on the morale of the United States military. Most of the people organizing the effort were from California, and in Los Angeles during December of 1941, a series of mock trials impeaching Roosevelt were held, mixing politics, religion, and anti-Semitism. Through British Israelism, weaponized religion began to undermine government systems. This led to the Great Sedition Trial of 1944. Ironically, not only was weaponized religion used against the United States government, but Richard Nixon also recognized the level of influence achieved by the groups involved and chose to use weaponized religion. Do you think that might still be happening today? By many of the same groups involved in or connected to defendants of the sedition trial of 1944. To spread domestic fear of communism in the United States by using members of the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship International. FGB-MFI was founded by Demos Shakarian. Get this, guys. Get this. Demos Shakarian, the nephew of the Kardashian family, patriarch Tados Kardashian. The Kardashians and Shakarians sponsored William Branham's revivals in 1947. Yeah, the Kardashians. Like Kim Kardashian? Okay, sorry. The Kardashians and the Shakarians sponsored William Branham's revivals in 1947, and William Branham is photographed attending the Full Gospel Businessmen's International Convention, where then Vice President Nixon appealed to the weaponized religion to help fight the greatest battle ever fought, the Battle of the Minds. Now, in the National Security Council, we consider, of course, the military policy, the economical policy, the political policies that the United States can adopt to meet this threat. But all of us know that the great battle in which we are engaged today is one which is not only military, economic, and political in character, but that in the final analysis, it is a battle for the minds and the hearts and the souls of men. I think I'll check, but that's Nixon. Yeah, Richard Nixon. The group's success is not only evident from the historic fears of communism that spread throughout the United States through religious propaganda, but also from the fact that Richard Nixon engaged the group once more when he became president. Specifically, Nixon engaged Branham's Splinter group in Chile, Paul Schaefer's Colonia Dignidad compound. Declassified documents confirm that Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Carter were all in collaboration with the Pinochet regime from 1973 to 1981. After a meeting held between Chilean media tycoon Augustine Edwards, Pepsi Cola owner Donald Kendall, and the CIA, the United States Attorney General convinced Nixon to form a task force for staging a military coup in Chile. The CIA worked directly with DINA, Pinochet's intelligence agency, which used Colonia Dignidad as a national intelligence training center run by Germans. It was the central receiver of all the information from the external apparatus of DINA.
But what I'm believing for is a generation. A generation will rise up with a corporate faith, a corporate anointing to press into realms, because it's my conviction that as much as God put on a William Branham, 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 or a Catherine Kuhlman.
Several years ago, I was laying on the floor. I think it may have been in a prayer chapel, and it's asking God if I could have the mantle of William Branham. I just got done. In fact, Bill has a series old videos of William Branham, and I just
talking about him. I'm talking about many men and women in the past. William Branham had a gift of a word of knowledge that was so scary. It was so scary.
Oh, yes, here he is. Bless the Lord. I said to him, I'm a student of the healing revival, and one of the men that was noted in that revival was William Branham, who gave the prophecy about the 7 things that would happen in the last days, and all of them have been accurate up to now. And this is the grave of William Branham.
William Branham, same thing. He experienced the third dimension where God used him in such ways. I have videos of it, and I sit and tremble watching that man being used. Details about people, I mean details. William Branham is his name. William Branham was preaching, my dear, when a halo appeared over his head, preaching in Louisiana. You can look him up on YouTube, it'll shake you up.
It's a great movement released in America in 1948. It really started in 1946. The day was May the 7th, 1946, today. May the 7th, 1946, an angel appeared to a prophet by the name of William Branham. And he said, you're going to be a part of one of the greatest healing movements and harvest and miracles that the world has seen since the day of Pentecost. And it's in the history books. My wife said,
Getting a hope from God. To be able to see, to discern the times and the seasons that's ahead of you. And the thing about the elephant, it wasn't just an ordinary elephant, it was a wild elephant, a wild elephant. It was radical, 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 radical.
Bam! Bam! I've said, God, welcome to my world where it's naturally supernatural. Have you ever heard of a man by the name of William Branham? He had, without a doubt, since the days that Jesus walked in the flesh, the greatest miracle ministry I ever read about. Wow.
I hear the Lord talking to me about something. All right, come on, Billy Ray. Come on. There was an angel that used to stand beside William Branham. William Branham.
William Branham.
Was it a demon? Because William Branham he denied the doctrine of the Trinity. That makes him a heretic.
And when that angelic being was present, everyone was healed that he ministered to. The Lord said that was a taste of what he is going to do with his body.
With his body. With his body.
Run.
There's just one name that can keep you out of hell, and it's the name of Jesus. The name of Jesus. The name of Jesus.